How did this food blogger with zero SEO background eventually turn her passion project into a successful website?
But I just dabbled with it, had a lot of fun, did not contemplate it becoming a business or a career at all. It was just pure enjoyment. 2 years after I started, I then switched over to Mediavine, and it sort of, started to become more than just a hobby. My traffic sort of ranges from about 500,000 to 1 million page views a month.
She shares some truly interesting blogging strategies.
I really do go with what the reader wants, and then I go with what I want, and then I probably look at seasonality, and then I look at keyword research. At the end of the day, I want SEO traffic, but you know what I want more than SEO traffic? I want direct traffic. I like to include something in my post that I don't see many people including, which is recipe testings. If you're constantly just being bombarded with these beautiful photos, they just think I'm this, wizard that just everything works, and it's quite the opposite. Most things don't work in my kitchen, so I guess it humanizes me a little bit.
And some very important tips all serious online business owners need to hear.
I think it starts with really viewing your business and the social media as a two-way conversation. I just feel like when you do that, sometimes it's just this extra ad that people often get really surprised, and they're really thankful that they actually do hear from you and that you're happy to take the time of day to answer their questions. And I think this is a real way to build connection and build connection with the brand. I've seen a lot of people come and go. It can turn around for you, but it just depends if you're willing to hang in there and keep going.
Welcome to an exclusive Niche Pursuits interview with Jessica Holmes, owner of sweetestmenu.com, joining us with some truly helpful and hopeful advice. Enjoy. Before we jump into this podcast, Brandon Gailey, the founder of Rank IQ, who is also the sponsor of this episode, will share an exciting finding from a 1-year organic traffic study of Mediavine and Raptive bloggers.
Thanks for allowing me to come on and share this with your audience. So, we recently did an extensive study comparing Mediavine bloggers who are active Rank IQ users versus Mediavine bloggers that don't use Rank IQ. This gives you a nice apples to apples comparison of established bloggers who are typically using some kind of keyword research tool like Rank IQ. Our study looked at 2,300 Mediavine blogs and the organic Google traffic that they've received over a 12-month period. We also segmented the bloggers in the study into 3 groups by their traffic size. Across all 3 traffic segments, the study found that Mediavine bloggers using Rank IQ ended up with an increase of 4.68 times the monthly Google traffic of the Mediavine bloggers not using Rank IQ. We did the same study with 1,100 AdThrive bloggers, which is now called Raptive. And across all 3 segments, we found that Raptive bloggers using Rank IQ ended up with an increase of over 5 times the monthly Google traffic of Raptive bloggers not using Rank IQ. For those of you that don't know about Rank IQ, we are the only SEO toolset made just for bloggers. Rank IQ has a hand-picked library of the lowest competition, high traffic keywords for every niche, and a content optimization tool that guides you in creating the most helpful kind of content that Google loves.
To see the results of this study and find out more about Rank IQ, hit the pause button right now and go to rankiq.com. That's rankiq.com. All right, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman. Today we are joined by Jessica Holmes with sweetestmenu.com. Jessica, welcome on board.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of the podcast. I've been listening for most of this year, and I've actually learnt so much from this podcast. So really happy to be here.
Oh, man, it's always great to have a listener on board. You kind of know the flow.
Yes.
You know how we like to do things around here. Our time before this podcast and the intros was super quick and easy. You already know how things go. So it's great. It's going to be great to have you. And I'm very excited to talk about your website. You know, we were talking before we hit record that over the years, we tend to end up interviewing a food blogger, if you will, here or there. And it's been a little while since we've had one on. And it's been a little while since we've had one on following this kind of bevy of Google's updates in 2023 and the tail end of 2020. So I'm really excited to talk to you today about how you've grown this website and what you're up to. Why don't we start by doing it like we always do? Maybe give us some backstory on who you are and catch us up to when you started sweetestmenu.com.
Yeah, sure. Well, I started Sweetest Menu in 2014, which is a lifetime ago now, coming up 10 years early next year. So, but when I started, it was very humble beginnings. I was working full-time as a copywriter, and I was doing graphic design classes at night, and they were finishing up, and I was just looking for something creative to do in my spare time. I had no kids, so the evenings and weekends were all mine, and I was head over heels in love with food blogs, following so many, and yeah, my husband said, "Why don't you start a food blog?" And I was a bit hesitant at first, but I did it, and I didn't tell anyone for a good 6 months, I think, but I just dabbled with it, had a lot of fun, did not contemplate it becoming a business or a career at all. It was just pure enjoyment, but I did fall in love with it, and I learnt, well, I'm still learning, but I just learnt so much about the blogging world. And I think I probably got addicted to blogging when people started to leave comments and say they tried one of my recipes, or just tell me that my photos looked great or something. You know, it was back when people left lots of comments on blogs, and I just couldn't believe people from around the world started to find me, started to find and enjoy my recipes, and I just got hooked. But it was about 18 months in, it was still purely just a hobby, but I started to watch these other bigger bloggers around me start to turn theirs into businesses. Like I was following, you know, Pinch of Yum, Sally's Baking Addiction, some of these massive, massive sites. And I was like, oh, they're turning theirs into a business. That's interesting. And my dad said to me, "Why don't you put some ads on your site?" And I was like, "Oh no, Dad, I don't want ads ruining my nice aesthetic." You know, I was really hesitant, but then I was like, "Oh, why not?" So I threw on. I just signed up to Google AdSense, and that first month I made $50, and I just thought that was incredible. Like I was like, someone is paying me money to do what I'm just loving, and you know, pay for my ingredients that month. I just thought that was incredible. So thus the business technically started. And I think about 2 years after I started, I then switched over to Mediavine, and it sort of, you know, started to become more than just a hobby. But I actually continued doing it as a side hustle for 6 years. So I stayed in my full-time career for 6 years before moving over to becoming a food blogger in March 2020.
Wow. Okay. So you went full time. Geez, that's basically when COVID hit, actually, right?
It was really interesting. So the day I quit my job and the day I packed up my desk was this same day that all my colleagues were packing up their desks because they've been told they had to go work from home for 2 weeks. And then it ended up being 2 years. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it was very strange time, but it worked out, even though like it's a horrible few years, but it was amazing for me because it had the baking surge, you know, and everyone was at home. And so I got this massive 2020 and 2021, this massive traffic surge. So I got to really enjoy and sort of ride that wave, which was a nice perk considering it was a real bummer of a few years.
I was going to say, I mean, I know that we've had travel website owners on, you know,
Yeah.
since the pandemic. And obviously that was a huge downswing for them,
Yes.
followed by a resurgence. I've got to imagine with so many people being at home, perhaps you left your full-time job to turn to this full-time. Perhaps that was actually, looking back on it, pretty good timing. Like, did you
It
see
was,
a
yeah.
fairly sustained bump in traffic as a result of that?
Yes, I did. I did. And what was nice was I didn't count on that. So it wasn't like I left while I was in the middle of that surge thinking it was going to be like that forever. So by 2019, I knew it was a sustainable business. So I'd earned my day job. I was earning more doing this than my day job. So that's why I felt sort of comfortable leaving. And then I had a really big 2020 and 2021. It was a beautiful surge of traffic, like effortlessly just going up. It was wonderful. And 2022 and 2023, it has definitely come back down, but still higher than like it was 2019. But it was a bit sad to watch that, like, slowly come back down to a more like even spread of traffic. Yeah.
I tend to ask this question to a lot of people who have a website that's maybe like 10 years old, like yours is.
Yes.
And especially in the food space, I'm just curious. You don't have to spend a ton of time going into it, but a lot of times the arc of traffic sources for a 10-year-old site will change, and a lot of times the traffic arc for food websites will change. Like, did you lean heavily on, say, Pinterest traffic in the late 2016, 17, 18, 19, and then like where's the traffic coming from these days compared to maybe the first few years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So yes, it was definitely more social heavy, and definitely Pinterest was the biggest driver in those early years. And then I had my first SEO audit in 2016, so 4 years in, and that was that was with Casey Marquis, who I believe you've had on the show. And through implementing a lot of the suggestions that he made, that's when I was able to really like tap into SEO traffic for my site, which is now the number one traffic driver. But prior to that, it wasn't a huge traffic driver for my site.
Interesting. Yeah. So you made the transition. I like to do this. A lot of people like to do this. We're going to get into the nitty gritty of a lot of the details you use to build this site out and some of the things that make it unique. But maybe catch us up to right now. Any numbers, anything you're comfortable sharing in terms of the site, where it's at, whether it's traffic, monetization, number of articles, like just to give people an idea of the scope of where you're at almost 10 years in now.
Yes. So I have over 500 recipes, I believe, on the site. And I'm getting somewhere, the traffic ebbs and flows a lot throughout the year. So I'm currently enjoying my wonderful December, which is always beautiful since it's a baking blog. For those that don't know, everyone wants to bake in December, which is awesome. But my traffic sort of ranges from about 500,000 to 1 million page views a month. And it was higher, like we mentioned before, it was higher than that in the previous few years, getting up to around 2 million. And so it's come down. But it's nice and consistent, which has been really good. And then obviously the ad revenue changes quite a bit, but that probably sits around, it could be anything from 10 to 30K a month.
Yeah. Congratulations. How amazing. You get over 1 million people looking at your recipes a month. That's phenomenal. Well, I have a lot of questions. I did spend some time on your site before, and I was telling you beforehand, you mentioned Casey. I could, after interviewing him, I could almost see some of the threads of or maybe the fingerprints of him on the site. We'll link to his interview for those of you who want to hear. That's probably about 1.5 years old now, but it's still super applicable in terms of the things that he shared on the podcast interview. But you had to transition to an SEO strategy from, it sounds like, a more social media. Maybe we can use that to transition into kind of how you built the current site. Was it one of those things where you were just noticing some traffic from organic search and saying, well, I want to pursue that? Or was it really more of a decision to say, something's changing in social media, for example, like I've got to switch my traffic sources? Like, how purposeful was that transition to focus on SEO?
It was pretty purposeful, I think, especially after I had the audit with Casey. I think I just really saw a lot of potential in that. It wasn't necessarily turning away from social media. It was just in addition to, I was just seeing how powerful it was. And I was seeing it through a lot of other people, to be honest, more than myself, how they were growing their sites. But my SEO traffic was just slowly increasing, and it was increasing quite effortlessly, I think, because I guess it's a whole like passive income thing. Once you start to rank and once you get, many pages that are ranking, it's just working for you in the background over and over and over. So I was just very keen to have that working for me, if that makes sense. So once I had my first audit, I then started to implement that. And I've actually had 3 audits now with Casey over the years, because as you know, some things keep changing. But to be honest, if I went back and listened to his first one, I think a lot of his advice would be very similar. There's a few little quirks that have changed over those times, but at the end of the day, he's always talking about what's best for the reader. And I think, that's still what we're all harping on about at the moment, and what Google keeps trying to tell us to do, even though, sometimes they lie to us a little bit. But so that's what I'm trying to do. And I think with my site, I've always been a really big believer in, I think this comes, sorry, I'm just trying to think. I think this comes from, because I've always had a lot of interaction with my readers, whether that's through website comments, through social media, through email, people send me their photos of their recipes that they've made. I've always felt very close to the reader. So I've always tried to have a real reader first approach. So even though SEO is definitely a high priority for me, at the end of the day, I want to be doing what's best for my readers. And, a lot of people get a bit surprised when, I know there's a lot of food bloggers and other people that will go really heavy on keyword research. But like for me, if multiple readers say like, oh, they'd really love this recipe, and I do some keyword research and I can see like, I'm never going to rank for that. Like if you take banana bread, right? I'm never going to rank for banana bread. It's never going to be an SEO keyword for me that I can touch. But I'm not going to do that because of that. Because if my readers want that, then I'd love to put it on my site. And at the end of the day, I want my readers to be able to come straight to my site. And if they want a banana bread recipe and there's not one there, then that's kind of a disservice to them. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, it does. And that was going to make my next question, which is, a typical SEO focused website is going to do keyword research, and they're going to come up with a variety of recipes that are going to go in their content calendar. And maybe they'll focus on breads for the month or two to kind of build out what might be considered topical authority. It sounds like maybe you take a bit of a different approach to how you come up with the topics that are going to go on the site. And I'm curious to hear how you do come up with them.
Yeah, so it's a lot more fluid. So I do have a content calendar, but at the end of the day, I think because this is a creative website, I love the creative side of things. So if I come to a week and I think, well, I had planned to do a pumpkin pie, but I don't really feel like doing pumpkin pie, but I've just had this great idea of doing a cheese scone instead, or something, like that, then I will definitely switch things out. I don't like sit hard and fast to things, but I really do listen to what my readers want. So they do constantly ask for recipes, and I do have a big list of what they want. And I try to then do the keyword research after that to kind of see what I can put into the post. But yeah, I'm not a traditional sort of keyword research first kind of person. I really do go with what the reader wants, and then I go with what I want, and then I probably look at seasonality, and then I look at keyword research. So yeah, I don't know if this is wrong to tell people, because it's not necessarily, like following the Google rule, but it works for me. And at the end of the day, I want SEO traffic, but you know what I want more than SEO traffic? I want direct traffic. I want people that just go, I want a dessert. I'm just going to type in sweetestmenu.com and come straight to me. And those people, I want them to find what they're looking for when they come to my site. So that may mean doing recipes that don't necessarily rank in Google.
Where does SEO come into play? Let's say you are making the banana bread recipe, if we could,
Yes.
which I checked your site. I don't see banana bread here.
I do have a banana
I'm looking
bread.
right now.
I do.
Okay. I couldn't find. You do rank very well for banana cupcakes, by the way, but But anyways, I digress. Let's just take the banana bread topic and run with it. Like, let's say you are going to make that, and whether or not you look ahead of time or not, you've kind of already determined, wow, that's a very competitive keyword from an SEO standpoint, but my readers want it. I'm going to make it. What do you do? Where do you add the SEO components? Where do you optimize for search, even though you're focusing on content that your users want more than maybe a search engine wants?
Yes. Yep. No, great question. For that, obviously, for me, that comes in all the formatting of the post. So I have a sort of a loose format that I stick to, with different headings and different topics and how I want to format my post. So usually, that's talking a little bit about the post. Talking a little bit about the recipe. I like to include something in my post that I don't see many people including, which is recipe testing. So when I test multiple recipes, or iterations of the recipe, I should say, I take photos of it, and my readers love to see it fail. So I love to put those images in the post where I can. And I think now that a few years ago, I got told to not do that because it's typically, not really an SEO thing to put in there. But now I feel like it could be, because with AI and everything like that's kind of proving that I'm a real person. I've really tested this in my kitchen, and no one can really fake those. Well, I mean, they can fake, but yeah, it's real recipes, real tests, real fakes. Real flops when it doesn't go well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I put that in, and then obviously I just break down the post. Now I try to put in process shots for Google and for my readers, and then I try to really put in like expert tips or frequently asked questions, and I get a lot of that again from my readers rather than I do check Google and see what people are asking, but also I just know I get a lot of common questions, so I know what my readers are typically going to ask. And even it can come in later. So if I publish it on Instagram, or if a comment comes in and they, want to ask, oh, can I use a different shaped tin, or what can I add this mix in instead of that mix in, then I might go in and add that into the post. So I'm just trying to answer every question that I can in the post. And then obviously like a fully optimized recipe card and really nice images with, alt text and all those sort of things. So still trying to follow all the SEO rules, but sort of doing it a little bit my way.
I'm looking at the recipe testing, and you're exactly right. I'm looking at the one on chocolate buttermilk cake, and you have different pictures showcasing when you use melted butter versus vegetable oil and so forth. It reminds me of one of my favorite websites, because I've gotten into cooking with a sous vide over the years, has been Serious Eats. And they do the very similar thing where they'll show you pictures of, hey, cook it at 165, cook it at 160, cook at 155. Here's 4 hours, here's 8 hours. And I feel like I'm learning, but
Yes.
You're right. It also shows the reader and perhaps the algorithm that you're actually testing these different things.
Yes, that's right. And that was something that over the years, I think it just started by accident when on Instagram stories, I would often have a peek in my kitchen, and I just kept putting up like, oh, this didn't work, and it would be a terrible cake with a big hole in the middle or spilling over the sides. And I noticed that I just got so much feedback on those photos, and just so many people going like, oh wow, that's really interesting, or oh, that happens to me too. And it was like people also didn't realize that I have those fails all the time in my kitchen, and I was kind of a bit surprised, but then I thought, well, I guess that makes sense. If you're constantly just being bombarded with these beautiful photos, they just think I'm this, wizard that just everything works, and it's quite the opposite. Most things don't work in my kitchen, so I guess it humanizes me a little bit, and I love to share it because as I'm learning, then I can share that feedback with them, and then they learn, and they seem to really enjoy it. So that's sort of where it stemmed from.
You talk about how you do some things a little differently. I mean, maybe I just wanted to ask a bit more about that, because I'm looking, first thing that stands out to me is all your headers are in lowercase font, right? So you're not kind of capitalizing things like normal, like the SEO in me goes, ooh, I don't know about that. Like there are some things as I look at your post. How do you make those decisions? Like what causes you to kind of go, I'm going to write this header, almost like I'm texting someone rather than a classic header, and any other things you do because you think it's more on brand than proper, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, that decision just stemmed from when I got a website redesign. But I do remember Casey flagging that with me, with the headings, but we didn't change it. So whether that was a good decision or not, I'm not sure. But it is hard though, because it automatically lowercase is it? And if I accidentally have the caps lock on, I can't tell. But then it shows up in the because now I have the jump links. So if I've
Yeah.
like, so that is a bit of a headache actually. If I could go back, I'm not sure if I would do that again. But I think for the most part, apart from maybe the recipe testing section, I think I probably follow most of the rules. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I'll let you know if anything comes to mind. I'm
That's
not
fine.
typically a rule
Well,
breaker.
yeah, too. Well, and you mentioned just briefly, so I wanted to kind of maybe dovetail that question to the next one because you mentioned it already, and I think everyone would benefit from hearing about this. This is certainly something we're all thinking about right now, and that is adapting as perhaps the rules as they were change. Right? You talked about how if you went back and listened to that first audit when you first started looking at SEO back in 2016, you feel like a lot of the things you're doing now are fairly similar. You know,
Yes.
making content for the user, but you did mention you've adapted. Like, what adaptations have you had to make? Any big ones that come to mind? Any changes or pivots you've had to do along the way?
Yeah, there has been quite a lot actually, and uh, I'm not sure how much of it is that it has actually changed and how much of it has been. I've been quite slow to react. So I'm trying to learn to be faster. But if like I said, if I went back to that audit, Casey was telling me in 2016 to do process shots, and I didn't do them. I told him, I've got a full time job. I don't have time. Sorry. But if I had been doing that since 2016, I think today I would have been in a much stronger position. So some of those things have sort of stood that test of time. But for me, I've only started doing them religiously. So like in every single post, probably in the last year or two. So that's a big one for me because that's changed my entire, like not strategy, like how do you say, like day-to-day operations, like to
Yeah,
actually
your publishing workflow.
yeah, like my workflow. So that's a huge consideration, and that often means I'm having to make something multiple times because if I only have a certain window to photograph something, I'll need to have it a finished cake or whatever it is, and then also the steps. So I'm often making it complete and then remaking it excuse me, to make the process shots and then remake and then rebaking it and then just like having so many cakes to eat. So yeah, that it's really hard to like manage that. But yes, so that's been a huge one, and that's been a huge one for my workflow. And then probably just being more robust in my post. So even when I look back now, I thought I was writing really helpful posts, and now I look back and I like the content was very thin, and I was answering a few questions, but there were so many more that I could answer. And I think for me, sometimes it's that careful balance of being really helpful, having lots of great content, which your readers hopefully enjoy, which Google likes. But then also, for me personally, sometimes when I look at other bloggers who are very successful, sometimes I find their posts too overwhelming. They've got too much information in there. And by the time you get down to the recipe card, I don't want to make the recipe anymore. I've gotten so overwhelmed with all the steps and the advice and everything. So I kind of try to sit somewhere in the middle there. So it's robust, it's helpful, it's answering questions without being too verbose or trying to reach a magical word count when there isn't one. And yeah, and then not being thin and crappy because actually that was the thing. So when I mentioned earlier that my page views sort of were coming off the COVID rise, they also, I realized, I think in 2022, so that's sort of when I was contacting Casey again as well, is I realized I was having a lot of content decay, and I hadn't really understood what that was. So for me, I was sort of still caught up in the blogging world of publish, 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 new, new, new. it was always more. Everyone, it's a bit like the social media, right? Everyone's hungry. As soon as you do one post, they want another post. Keep posting. And I wasn't seeing a huge decline, but I was just really flatlining. And I started listening to a lot of podcasts and talking to Casey and digging into my analytics and just going like, why am I not growing? Because I was just used to, the more you published, the more you grow.
Mm-hmm.
You think it's just going to be that upwards right arrow. And then, when it was flatlining, I couldn't understand. And that's when I digged into my analytics and saw that there was quite a lot of content decay happening, where some of my posts that had been long standing and doing really well on the first page of Google had just started to slip down further and further. And I started to look back and realize, I probably had been a little bit lucky for some of those to rank, because the recipes might still be great. And a lot of my recipes do stand the test of time because I retest them, but the posts are not great. So they need gutting and redoing. So that's sort of where my strategy has moved. I've completely forgotten what your original question is, by the way. I just feel like
Well,
I
it's
went on.
perfect because my next question was on article updating. So, that's actually where I was going with it. I was going to ask you about it because, keeping up with what has changed, right, as things develop and as things adapt. Certainly in 2023, a lot of what we know about writing content for the web has changed, at least for the time being, and really that does kind of point to article updating old content. And it's interesting to ask food bloggers specifically about updating old content, because in many ways, like, your chocolate cake recipe doesn't necessarily need to change, right? It's the same as it was in 2016, especially if you found a good one. So
Yeah.
what do you do when you go back and look at a chocolate cake recipe that you said has decayed in terms of the traffic? And like, how do you identify what to update? What are you doing to update it? How extensive are you going into updating old content?
Yeah, I'm going all in. So I usually start, if it's a recipe that I haven't made in a while, because a lot of my recipes, even if it's old, I've been making it in my kitchen, so I know it stands the test of time. But yeah, a lot of it is remaking that recipe. That's where I would start, is remaking it, making sure it works. And sometimes it does need some altering. What I often find actually is, because I've gotten a bit older, some of my original recipes are just a bit too sweet. I think I just had a real like teenage sweet tooth, so it's just kind of balancing that out. But it's even just things that it comes down to, like with the ingredients. I'm always trying to write, for anyone sort of in the world, but the top three countries are Australia, the US, and the UK. And we all have different ingredients with different names. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's quite complex, and even our cup measurements are different, and our
Yep.
tablespoons to your table. And so even back in the day, it would just be, I would just write it as it worked for me. But now I try to put in a lot more notes, or now I know like dark chocolate here is semi-sweet chocolate there, and things like that. So I actually update how the recipe is written to make sure that all my ingredients are actually listed correctly, as far as the main audience, as they understand. And then also, it's even just things like my recipes, I'm splitting it out into better step-by-step steps, because I used to write, I'd write a long recipe and it would be like 3 steps and it would be so hard to read. So now it's like breaking it up. And as I said before, I was a copywriter, and even though I was a copywriter back then, I'm a much better copywriter than I was back then. So now I go through and I can even rewrite it or rewrite the steps. I'm a better baker now, so I can maybe even explain how to do things a little bit better. So essentially the recipe usually stays the same, but it may be sort of rewritten, and then maybe tweaked a little bit if there's a bit too much sugar or it needs a bit more salt or things like that. But essentially it stays the same. And then it's usually, if it's an older post, it's pretty much gutting the whole thing, and redoing all the photos, putting in those process shots, and redoing everything from the how to do it to all the questions to all that information. And I use like content optimizers, and then I just basically go to Google and have a look around and see what people are asking and things like that. but yeah, I've got a good place now. I feel like I've got a good strategy of how I structure my posts. But yeah, it's a lot of work. Like you kind of think updating
Mm-hmm.
first is easier, but I don't know if it's easier than a new one or not. It gives you somewhere to start, but I mean, and it can take out that recipe testing element. Like sometimes, when I create a recipe from scratch, I can be making it like 6 times or something. So obviously, like with this, you might only need to make it once or twice, and you feel like, yeah, that's good. Um, but yeah, the whole gutting and redoing all the images it's a lot of work.
Oh, I feel like new content is so much easier than updating old content,
Yeah,
which it doesn't. I do. It doesn't make any sense intuitively, but
yeah.
updating old content is so difficult.
Do you think it's like because you kind of lose the creativity? Because sometimes I just go, I've got to do a new one because I've got to get excited because I get excited, like, and that's how I get it out on social media because I'm so excited to share this new recipe. And when it's an old one, even though I love it, it's still old. So like, I'm excited,
Mm-hmm.
but not that excited.
I think
So
it's really hard to look at something you created, and even though you know it needs updating, it's hard to know like what needs updating because you were so invested in it for at one point in time. And so it's like I know this needs changing, but what am I going to change? And it's hard to get that perspective on it. Whereas when you are coming at a fresh piece of content, you can just come at it with all that vigor and all those new ideas without any kind of obstruction to what is and isn't working on it right now.
yeah, that makes sense. I feel you there.
I want to take a quick break from the episode to let the founder of Rank IQ, our sponsor, share a cool tactic bloggers are using to get big Google traffic gains.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm a blogger just like you. I also host the Blogging Millionaire podcast and have taken 3 blogs in different niches from 0 to 1 million monthly sessions. Bloggers like Megan Porta, who is the host of the Eat Blog Talk podcast, are using RankIQ's keyword library to target low competition keywords to write the majority of their new post on. 2 years ago, when Megan started using RankIQ, her blog's Google traffic had plateaued at around 30,000 monthly sessions. Megan's monthly sessions have steadily increased over the past 2 years of using RankIQ, and today her blog is getting close to 200,000 monthly sessions from Google organic search. RankIQ's keyword library has a list of the lowest competition, high traffic keyword phrases in every major and minor niche. For example, the food niche library has over 120,000 unique low competition phrases. And those 120,000 are separated into 100 sub niches like meal prep, air fryer, and baked desserts. All of the keywords in our library have been handpicked by a team of keyword research experts. We are the only keyword tool that does the research for you. This can save you up to 100 hours of doing the keyword research yourself, and it removes the large margin of error that the do-it-yourself keyword tools have so that every post you write will be able to compete for a top 10 ranking in Google. While I could continue to talk about the benefits, I think the 1-year study I mentioned at the beginning of the episode that found Mediavine bloggers using RankIQ ended up with an increase of 4.68 times the monthly Google traffic of the Mediavine bloggers not using RankIQ tells the story much better than any benefit can.
If you would like to get access to the lowest competition, high traffic keywords in your niche, then go on over to rankiq.com to set up your RankIQ account today. Hey, so SEO traffic from organic search, it is, I think you said about 65% of your traffic, but there's a whole lot of other sources. You've got social media. You've, to my knowledge, have a pretty thriving email list and newsletter. Like, I'd like to get into some of these things. I guess from a high level, how do you grow a loyal audience or an audience that wants to come to your site, whether you're using social, whether you're using email, whether you're using organic, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it starts with really viewing your business and the social media as a two-way conversation. So I just really make sure that I am present and able to talk to my audience. So I know, and this is the problem with outsourcing. So I know a lot of people outsource their social media, and trust me, I would love to outsource my social media sometimes. But it puts you further away from your audience, and that's what I've always been really hesitant. So even well, one of the big ways, which I guess isn't social media, but people leave comments on your blog posts, and I answer all of them. So I read them all and I answer all of them myself. And I'm, 10 years in, I'm still doing that every day. And I think that's a great way to stay close to your audience and to understand what they like, what they don't like, what they're having troubles with, what didn't work in your recipe. And I feel like that's one of the only ways to kind of get better. And I kind of take that approach with social media too. So I love to talk to my audience. So anyone who DMs me on Instagram, they're going to get me. I am going to respond to them. I love to put up like polls and surveys and ask me a question things on Instagram so I can hear from my audience. And I love to answer them. I love it when, they send me when they've made one of my recipes, I reply to it. People email me their photos, I reply to it. So, it's not rocket science or anything, but I do think that some people lose that closeness to their audience, whether it's just not their thing or whether they outsource it or however. But I feel like it's a huge value add to your business. And I mean, these are your readers, these are who you're creating for. And it's so incredibly valuable to me to have that feedback and to really listen to what people are saying and what they're asking for. And, and that's what's helped me. Like we were talking about the different names of ingredients before. That's how I know, is because people say, I don't know what that is. I don't know. And I wouldn't know, that otherwise. So it's been so incredibly helpful for my business. And other things is like doing reader surveys, and yeah, just anything really to get the conversation two-way. And I don't know about you, but I get so sad when, like, if you contact someone, like, because I know not everyone can be contactable 24/7, but when you reach out to someone and then they don't reply, and it's like really sad, and then you're like, are they not very nice in person, or did they just not see it? And you kind of wonder. So I just feel like when you do that, sometimes it's just this extra ad that people often get really surprised, and they're really thankful that they actually do hear from you and that you're happy to take the time of day to answer their questions. And I think I kind of view it as kind of like customer service. So it's just like the customer service that I want my business to offer. So,
Well, you know what they say, never meet your heroes.
It's so disappointing.
So you just said it. You had it in our agenda, and I really want to double down on this. I think it's really fascinating because I've interviewed a lot of people over the years, and I have never heard anybody ever once refer to their website and the things that they do, whether it's website, whether it's social media, whether it's email, as customer service. Now, if you were to go to and I'm using air quotes here for a whole host of reasons. Anyone who's listened to the news podcast this year will know why I'm using air quotes right now. But if you were to go to a real business, air quotes applied,
Yes.
customer service is constantly talked about, right? Like I own a business. We talk about customer service every day. There's people who are dedicated to customer service. Most companies have people dedicated to customer service. Yet when we get into this world we live in now, this website creation world, I have literally never heard the words customer service said once in this podcast over years and years of hosting as we talk about websites. Talk about that more. Like, I just want to hear more of your thoughts on customer service and how you view it on your website. Is it just replying to comments, or does it go even further? How do you apply that?
I think, look, when I do a lot of things with my blog, I think from my own point of view, and for me, good customer service is so incredibly valuable. Like when I think of even there's some people that I partner with my site, like my ad company, and like I work with NerdPress who do the technical side. But even I'm thinking in my home life, like when we've bought our lounge suite, or like just all kinds of things. I can honestly come to mind when people have gone above and beyond with their customer service, when they've treated us so well that I think to myself, I am so thankful that I will not go to anyone else, because it doesn't really matter about the price. It doesn't really matter about what they're selling. If you offer me that customer service, like, I will come back and I will pay for that. And not only that, like, I will tell all my friends, which I do. And I think there's just so much power in that. And in the same way, when you get poor customer service, like, it leaves such a bad taste in your mouth, right? And I just think it's such an easy thing and a free thing apart from time, for me to offer, that can really set me apart. And to be honest, it's something that I really enjoy, because it is that personal connection. Because at the end of the day, websites are, the screen, and you can feel very like you're behind the screen. People hide behind it. You can feel very removed, very lonely, because you're working from home or wherever you're working. But this is a real way to build connection, and build connection with the brand. So I don't ever want to be a website where, a lot of those big food media websites are like, people, they come and they go, they come and they go. And that's because, like, even if the recipe is great, like, it doesn't have any meaning behind it. But if you come and you feel like you meet me, and then you try one of my recipes and you love it, and then you send me a photo, and then I say, wow, like, you did really great. Or even sometimes not, like, it didn't work out, but I say, oh, hey, maybe try this next time, or thanks for letting me know, I'm going to try it in my kitchen and redo it, or whatever it is. Like, there's just a human connection there. I mean, it's not rocket science, but we love, like, human connection, and I love human connection. And I think it's what will keep people coming back to my site. And I don't say that in a, oh, goody, like, they come back to my site, I get to make more money. But it's like, these are the people that I really want to come to my site. These are the people that I want to interact with, and they make my recipes and they enjoy them, and they, essentially enjoy me. And that's that joy that we get to share with each other. And that's why I do what I do, if that makes sense. But at the end of the day, I just think it's a really valuable thing that businesses can do, that doesn't cost a lot of money, that at the end of the day is so valuable for you, because it keeps you in the mindset of your reader, close to your reader, to understand what they want. And I say reader, for other people, it's, their audience, not necessarily the reader. But and I think it can bring a lot of joy as well, even though sometimes you have to go through the troubleshooting. I mean, not every comment is a nice comment, but yeah, at the end of the day, I think it is a very, very good thing, and a very easy thing. And now with social media, it's just getting easier and easier to stay close to our readers.
How do you, like, what tips do you have for accomplishing all that you do on the variety of platforms you're on? I mean, we're, into this interview now. You're clearly creating new content, and there's a lot of depth that goes into that. You're also updating old content, and you're taking that content, you're putting it on the web, on a variety of social media channels. You're emailing your audience. How are you? Is there a process you follow? Is there a way you're kind of maximizing your ability to be active on all those platforms?
When the kids go to sleep, do everything. So at the moment, I'm a stay-at-home mum. I've got a 3-year-old and 9-month-old. So I work whenever I get the chance, which isn't a whole lot, to be honest. So this is all coming from someone who I would say is definitely working part-time. But something I learned from when I did this as a side hustle for 6 years is that you can only do what you can do. And there are so many social platforms, like you mentioned, that I can't be active on all of them, and as much as I would like to, that's just not where I'm at the moment, and I just don't have that ability. So I think the best thing that you can do is just choose where to put your time. And so, for me, like I mentioned, Instagram is a big channel for me, and it's somewhere where I've been active for many years, and I have a lot of audience interaction there. So that's what I prioritize. And then I have Pinterest is the next big one. And then like I barely do much on Facebook and much on TikTok or much on YouTube. And that's something I definitely would like to change, but I just sort of have to make peace with the fact that I cannot get to that at the moment. But in saying that, I still monitor the comments. So I even have a VA who's been helping me the last couple of years with creating pins and helping me manage my Pinterest schedule. And we still keep an eye on Pinterest comments and answer them together. And she emails me whenever there's ones that I need to be looking after. But she does help me manage that. Because I actually didn't even know there was Pinterest comments. I only found out there was Pinterest comments like a few years ago, and there's all these like hundreds of comments over, and I felt so bad that for years and years I didn't realize that people were actually commenting. So now we answer all of those, and I monitor Facebook as well. But look, you can only do there's only so many hours in the day, and I know even if I was working full time and had all that time, there's probably still social media that I couldn't get to. So I don't want my advice to come across like you have to be all to everyone and drown in your social media accounts, because it can get very overwhelming. But just as much as you can, it's just great to be present if that's of value to you and your business.
What do you think? Because, I'll hit you kind of with the opposite side, or the devil's advocate to all this, which is there's a lot of food blogs and recipe websites on the internet today. What is it about your site and about your brand that you think has been so successful and has stood out and continued to grow year over year over year as you've been working on this?
Yeah. Two things. I think the first is my recipes work. So there's a lot of dud recipes out there, but I will say that I think for majority of people, my recipes do work, and they do produce something that's very delicious. And also, I think I've niched down to, I'm not just I'm not just a baking or dessert blogger. I really do hone into I'm a home baker, and I love to create quick and easy recipes. So I think that is the specific audience that I'm aiming at, and that's who I've found over the years. And I think there was probably a little gap maybe in the market where there just wasn't a whole lot, especially in Australia. There wasn't actually a whole lot of blogs or websites really catering to that. So I feel like I found that, which has been really great, and that's probably where I found some of my success. And the second thing is consistency. So we've talked about how I've had a constant lack of time because this is, a side hustle and blah, blah, blah. But the one thing I can say, I've had to learn SEO, I've had to learn food photography, I've had to learn how to bake, I've had to learn how to write. Well, I sort of knew how to write, but how to write for SEO or for my readers, and how to write recipes, which is very specific. And the one thing I can say over those 10 years is I've been consistent. I have done this week in, week out, every weeknight, every weekend for 10 years. And there's just something to be said for people that can stick it out in this world, in this blogging world. So I've seen a lot of people come and go, a lot of people get discouraged, a lot of people finish their blogs or sell their blogs, which is totally fine. But I think some of my success has almost purely just been because I'm still here. I'm still here. Yep. I'm still showing up. I'm still trying to learn, and something to be said for time, I think, sticking around for a while.
Yeah, it's a good reminder. It's really easy to look at maybe the last month of results or the last 3 months of results, or look at the last seasonal update or the last Google update or whatever. But oftentimes people who talk about success talk about taking this very long-term view. And when you pull that graph back, you start to see that a lot of what we might be living in right now is very small in comparison to the larger journey.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's, thankfully I wasn't hit with the helpful content update, but I've heard how devastating that has been for some people. And I can only imagine how devastated I would be if I got decimated by that. But I think, yeah, for people in that scenario, I would just be saying, like, just hang in there. Because if you can hang in there and you can keep going and you can make some changes, like, it can turn around for you. But it just depends if you're willing to hang in there and keep going.
Final question from me, and it has to do all the way back to what you introed with when you talked about where the site was at today, and you talked about how you're monetized on Mediavine with ad traffic. Have you tried any other forms of monetization? Have you thought about adding anything else, or are you doing any other forms of earning revenue from the site?
Yeah, I've been very lucky that I have been able to maintain a really good income through ads. But I do a little bit of affiliate. But to be honest, it doesn't do so well in Australia, like even like Amazon, because a lot of my traffic is US. And anyways, this whole thing about the links and blah blah blah. So a little bit of affiliate. And I've worked with a few brands over the years and done a little bit of brand work, but I don't do a lot. I'm very protective of my brand. I get asked to do some weird and wacky things, and they're just not on brand for me. So, I only work with a very select few brands, maybe a couple of times a year. Otherwise, it's been purely ad revenue. I would love to release a product sometime, but we'll just see in the next few years what I can get up to. And I would love to write a book one day. That would be the dream. So we'll see.
Back to time again. Yeah. There's only so many hours in the day, right?
And it'll be interesting to see. I think we're all holding our breath for 2024, what's going to happen with ads and, AI and all that sort of thing. So I'm sitting here wondering what's going to happen, but I'm holding on and enjoying the ride while I can.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good answer. I mean, yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, going back to the way that you approach social media, the way you're approaching revenue streams, like, try not to overcommit, but also making sure that you're involved to the point where your audience is.
Yeah, that's right. And just enjoying it, because at the end of the day, I think sometimes you can really hope to reach, these magical numbers, whether it be in traffic or in dollars and everything. But I mean, this is fun. Like, it's so fun figuring this out. And that's one of the reasons why I love listening to your podcast, is because I'm always getting like little gems and learning from people, or like when you guys cover the news, I love it, like listening, because you just give me like this quick summary, but also like I just like fester on it for the week, wondering, oh, what did that mean and what's going to happen? And so like, it's a really exciting time, even though it's, sort of a bit terrifying, it's exciting. So yeah, you just got to enjoy this wild blogging SEO world that we live in.
It is a wild ride. That's a perfect way to transition. Where can people follow along with you in 2024 and beyond on this wild ride? Obviously, we have your website, which I'll link to in the show notes, sweetestmenu.com. But any other places that people can follow along on?
Yeah, come join me on Instagram. Just my handle's @sweetestmenu. And we have lots of fun over there.
Okay, great. Jessica, this hour flew by. Thank you for coming on the podcast. It was great to have you, and continued success on your website. Really wish you all the best.
Thank you.